So here we are, remote learning. What is this? 3.0. Look, I know I said I was going to be away, that my wife was going to be in hospital, all that sort of jazz. Given that remote learning has happened, I can't really do anything to help her. So here I am. Um, what I had planned for you guys during the few days that I was going to be absent was you were going to work through that group task on chapter 1.5. Given that that's not really going to be possible, what I thought we'd do is we'll come back to that at a later date. We'll just move forward and we'll keep going through the text. So we're going to look at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives on health and well-being. So I guess sit back, get comfy, and we'll quickly go through this little slideshow. I will put it up onto Compass as well, so you can view it there. And if you've got any questions, hopefully you've joined the Health and Human team. If you haven't, go back through Compass and find the link to join the team, because that's how we can communicate more or less in real time. You can, chat with me on Teams. That's probably what I found the easiest way to do this whole remote learning thing. All right, let's do this. So it's a holistic view. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, they don't view health the same way that we do. They have, if you look at the definition there from the Aboriginal National Health Strategy, it's different. It's different to what we have. It's a holistic view, and a holistic view is characterized by the belief that you're looking at the whole picture, the big picture. Okay, individual bits and pieces don't make sense without that whole big picture. So Aboriginal well-being means not just the physical well-being of an individual, but refers to the social, emotional, and cultural well-being of the whole community, in which each individual is able to achieve their full potential as a human being, thereby bringing about the total well-being of their community. It is a whole of life view and includes the cyclical concept of life, death, and then life again. So what are some of the differences that that you guys can see there? Hopefully, when I've read the definition, you've already picked up on a few things. I'm just going to highlight some of the differences between our view of health and the Aboriginal view of health. So we've got the cultural well-being, kind of, I guess, relates to spiritual well-being, but not only that, it looks at the whole community. So it's not just an individual person, it's everyone, it's families, it's everyone in the immediate area. So that's quite different. And then they've also got the cyclical concept where we have the life and the death, and then I guess the rebirth of people. So in that sense, it's very different to what we believe. So the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders, they have a strong connection, and they place great emphasis on their culture. I mean, you've seen it probably demonstrated many times over in ceremonies and events and that sort of stuff. There's this really deep connection, and it's this connection and the importance that they place on their culture that determines the effectiveness of whether they're likely to seek treatment or using of health services, and seeking treatment, and then I guess how they're going to stick to said treatment. The closing the gap campaign, which no, it's on the next slide. It's shown that that people who, or the culture, the groups that have this strong connection are going to have significantly better self-assessed health status. So self-assessed health status we will look at in the next chapter. But basically, it's how a person views their health. Actually, I think we've already talked about it for memory. So there was a report, a plan that was put together, the National Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Health Plan 2013 to 2023, that identified the importance of that link, and having those strong connections within their culture, it decreased things like morbidity and mortality within those remote communities. When you compare it to the Northern Territory, they had lower rates of diabetes, they had lower rates of obesity, they had lower rates of cardiovascular disease. So having that link to the culture and participating in those cultural events, yeah, it compared to, I guess, those in, like further up in the Northern Territory, where you have more access to things like, fast food and all that sort of stuff. They're living their traditional way. They're going to, like we said, have lower rates of a lot of those lifestyle illnesses there. So here are, this is the plan that was put together. There are, 20 goals. And this is just a screenshot of the report, so you can see that, it's to do with immunisation of children, it's to do with smoking, it's to do with type 2 diabetes, and there's blood pressure, all this. It covers a range of different areas. If you want to have a look at it, my buffet's covering it at the moment, but there is a link down the bottom there that will take you to the plan itself. So these are some of the statistics taken from that report. So I guess have a bit of a look at it. We would have been having a bit of a discussion in class, but you can see that, if we compare, it says the age standardised mortality rates, circulatory diseases by Indigenous state. We have Indigenous Australians, so they have a much higher rate, sort of 550,000-ish back in 1998, compared to the non-Indigenous Australians, which was probably just a touch under 300,000. Okay, so you can see that they have a much higher rate, much higher death rate. It's almost double, but it has come down quite considerably. So I guess that's through, like education and those sorts of things, and better access to, facilities, maybe, I don't know, doctors going and visiting remote communities, that sort of thing. But you can also see that the non-Indigenous Australians has come down as well. So, better technology and so on and so forth. Down here we have the 7 to 8 to year 10 and year 7 to 8 to year 12 retention rates. So you can see that there are much lower rates in terms of Indigenous Australians. Only 61% of them actually making it all the way through to year 12. And in terms of like your year 10, you got excuse me, coronavirus, I guess. 97% making it all the way through to year 10. Whereas if you compare it to other students, we've got 100% making it all the way through to year 10, and it says 86% making it all the way through to year 12. So you can see that there's quite a gap between education there as well. Over here, proportion of mothers who smoke during pregnancy by Indigenous status. No, it doesn't matter. You don't need the legend. I was just looking at the screen, so I've left it off. So you can see Indigenous, they have a much higher rate, and it actually increases as it goes up to very remote. There is quite a big increase. It's over 20%. Hazard a guess why? And then you also see much lower rates of smoking with the non-Indigenous Australians. Perhaps it's to do with education, perhaps it's to do with access to that sort of stuff as well. Education, as we've shown here, much lower rates of completion. We can hazard any number of guesses, but you would be required to make an observation about the data there, and you could easily say that as we go further and further out, more and more remote, there is an increase in the proportion of mothers who smoke during pregnancy. So this is all just stuff that's taken from that health plan. So the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, they have a strong connection to culture, and they also have a strong connection to the land. Okay, the land is at the core of their existence. It's what defines them. It's what gives them their identity. So if you take this away, then ill health can occur. It lets them feel empowered, and it lowers their levels of stress. And if you have lower levels of stress, then you have higher or improved mental health. So I can't actually remember where I took this from, but I thought it was quite relevant. So in white society, a person's home is a structure made of bricks or timber, but to our people, our home was the land that we hunted and gathered on and held ceremony and gatherings. I thought that was, it was quite relevant, because we do identify our home as, it's something I would assume that most of us think is quite special to us, even though it's just made of bricks or timber or whatever it might be. And to the Aboriginals, their land would be likewise. It would be just as important to them, and to be removed from their land, or to have it taken off them, it probably would be quite stressful. So the social and emotional health and well-being, like we said, they view health as a holistic concept, and it incorporates connection to the land, it incorporates culture, spirituality, ancestry, family, community. That's what makes up the individual. So what I've got here are a couple of videos which I want you to watch. One is relatively short, the other one is a TED Talk, which look, for someone who, I would say I don't know a great deal about the stolen generation. I mean, I know a little bit about the history of it. It was quite an eye-opener. I wasn't aware of, I guess, everything that they would have experienced. So watch it and see what you think. Yeah.
I'm an Aboriginal of the Dunghutti tribe of eastern New South Wales. As a fair-skinned child, I used to look in the mirror, hoping that one day my freckles would join up and I would be a proper Aborigine. Over the years, I discovered how white authorities in Australia tried to make us go the other way, towards whiteness. How they attempted to systematically wipe out the Aboriginal race forever.
So you've seeing a bit of skin bleaching happening there.
Where's my family? I was taken away. So where's my family?
Well, removals began from the very beginning, that is by individuals. Right back in the 1790s in New South Wales and the 1810s in Tasmania, within 10 or 20 years of settlement, there were Aboriginal children who in one way or another had been taken from their families and were living with Europeans. It didn't become really a government process until the 20th century, when of course it was much more serious on a much larger scale. Governments had assumed that Aborigines were dying out, that evolution had dictated that they would eventually disappear. The number of what they call full-blooded Aborigines was declining. It appeared to be proving their scientific theories.
It was true Aboriginals were dying in great numbers, but not because evolution had determined it. It was from gunshots, poisoned waterholes and diseases brought by the settlers.
The newspapers, the parliamentary Hansards, the diaries, which set out the Australian record plainly and clearly in black and white, show beyond doubt that most whites on the frontier were well aware that Aboriginal people were being murdered in very large numbers.
This luxurious Melbourne home is a fairy tale come true for 3 Aboriginal girls from Melville Island, 180 miles from Darwin. Mr. and Mrs. Deutscher visited the island last year and adopted 3 Aborigines to bring up with their own 3 children. Christine is 4, and for the first time in her life she has a mother and father. 2-year-old Faye was rescued by a territory policeman who found her abandoned. They've been cared for by the Methodist Mission, and now they live in a 15-room mansion. Mr. Deutscher says he believes it's possible to integrate Aboriginals into white families. Christine certainly seems to be proving that Mr. Deutscher is right, and so does Faye. It's all so new to them, and they're still a little wide-eyed. A long way from Melville Island, but at last a home and the love and affection of a family of their own. Sleep tight, children, because you know that dreams do come true, don't you?
How do you determine what is a good intention? I mean, there were certainly people who said, particularly if they saw light-coloured children, and said these children shouldn't be allowed to grow up in the Aboriginal camp. They should be brought into white society and their level of civilisation raised. That was the sort of view. There were also people who thought that the conditions in camps were bad, and as they were. I mean, the social, medical conditions of many Aboriginal people was very, very poor, and so people thought, well, it's better if you take the children away. They'll have a better life. And many individuals adopted Aboriginal children on this assumption we can give them a better life. So good intentions were there, but behind that, particularly in the 1930s and right through into the 1940s, was this quite deliberate plan to breed the Aborigines out.
Norman B. Tyndale, the physical anthropologist, wrote the theory of race in Australia, and it looks like a stud book. It looks like a breeding manual for animals. If you mix 1 full blood with 1 half caste equals a 3/4 caste. 1 3/4 caste mixed with 1 quadroon equals 1 half caste. And that's published in a scholarly journal, in an anthropological journal.
Eugenics was an idea which was extremely important in most Western countries, and the idea was that through breeding you would improve the race or the nation. You would breed out bad characteristics with large-scale plans. That is, you would sterilise the unfit, and that happened widely in many Western countries. And in Australia it took the form of trying to breed out the colour.
you talking to you? Church was part of our life on the mission. You know, we used to come to church every day. But when you're small, you don't really know, you don't understand really, like what they were doing. So, you know, in a way, we were happy to come here. Getting on the truck and coming, you know, for a long drive somewhere, but we didn't know that that long drive gonna last for, you know, like this. It end up, you know, for a lifetime, really. What made it hard was we had people controlling us all the time, telling us this and that. And we didn't really have our own mind to speak what we wanted to say. We had someone saying it for us or what, you know, but it wasn't us speaking.
When Daisy was 16, she married a man who was also on the mission. Other stolen children were afraid of falling in love. Their Aboriginal names had been replaced with English names. They knew how easily they could end up marrying their own brother or sister. Some didn't find out until it was too late. After many years on the mission, all of Daisy's links with her family had been lost.
I really feel for May, you know, I know she's my sister, I really love her. But it took so long for us to get together. Like, that's the first time yesterday, like, we ever talked properly. We never ever talked like that before. So in all those years, that's what I was missing out on.
So, like I said, that was the short one, but, you know, like I said, I knew a little bit about the Stolen Generation, and having watched both of those videos, I'll play the second one in a sec, yeah, it's not good. It's not good. Some of the things that were done to those people, to the Aboriginals, you know, being taken from their loving family, you know, whilst it might have been, yeah, there might have been good intentions there, it definitely, you know, it's not the right thing to do. And then, yeah, the way they were treated, which you'll hear in this next video, it's pretty appalling.
The story I'm going to tell you today is not a very pretty one. It's about my childhood, thousands of children who've been into orphanages, institutions across Australia. Mum placed me in the orphanage when I was 4 years old at Ninorsia for education. At the age of 8, she removed me and my older sister. She saw that we weren't getting an education. The moment that we left the orphanage, there was a state alert for the West Australian Police to apprehend and arrest us. 8-year-old, 10-year-old, never committed a crime. We were arrested, we were handcuffed, and we were taken back. The only time I can remember being with Mum and Dad is 3 months of my life. 2 years after we were removed, Mum passed on. We were in the laundry working. Reverend Mother came in to call myself and my sister aside. What she said to us, I don't think I ever forgave her. Your mother's dead, get on with your work. This is coming from a so-called Christian person. Many times as a child, I tried to take my life. It was easy. I could have thrown myself down the stairwells. The orphanage wasn't a very nice place to be in. We weren't orphans. We had family. We had mum and dad. The reason we were taken away, the colour of our skin. We were placed in that orphanage and forgotten. Now, during my time, there was some 110 girls in the home. We did laundry for the old mission. There were the Aboriginal boys, about 60, 30 nuns, 60 monks, 205 white boys. Now that's a lot of work. We were only children. That work had to be done. Everything had to be ironed, sewn, put back in the laundry bags and taken back to where it came from on Thursday morning. So we had 3 days to do all that work. There were 5 of us girls ironing. I used to do the ironing. I don't iron today, I chuck my clothes in the dryer. The big machine that we put the sheets through, if the sheets are too damp, the machine will get stuck. So you've got to open it up to get the sheets flowing again. My sister put her arm in it to get the sheets. The girl on the other side didn't see her arm in the machine. She closed that machine on her arm. It had taken all of this off. She had one big burn from there all the way down. They didn't take her to a doctor. They sat her outside in the sun for that burn to dry. I used to watch my sister cry. It was so painful. The laundry was part of our everyday life as children. We went to school until we turned 13. From 13, we were in the laundry. A lot of the girls in the home were in their mid-20s, late 20s. There was one girl who stayed in that home for 44 years. She had nowhere to go. We did olive picking for the monastery. Take a good look at that picture. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, olives are ripe June, July. Have a good look at what we're wearing. We're kneeling in the wet grass. No jumpers. One little girl got a short sleeve jumper. We suffered with chilblains, stone bruises, abscess, you name it. We were never taken to the doctor. Now, we never wore shoes. Only to go to church on Sunday, we were dressed up. The rest of the week, we walked around bare feet. Norcia, if any of you have been there, is a very gravel place. We suffered a lot with stone bruises. Because our skin was so hard underneath our feet, they couldn't get a needle in to let the yucky stuff out. When it got infected, what the nuns used was a razor blade to cut away the hard skin. This little children I'm talking about. And then they'd crisscross it. Across on it, squeeze all the yuck out. I got a scar in the middle of my foot. I still got it today. One of the girls had an abscess on her breast. They opened that up with a razor blade. The girl fainted. We were never taken to the doctor. I remember 3 girls that were brought down here to Princess Margaret's. We never saw them again. Don't know if they passed away down here or what. We were never told. They talk about putting you in a home so you can learn hygiene. We lived in these clothes that you see in the picture. We had a bath once a week. About 8 or 10 girls bathed in the same water. We put those clothes on. We had a knickers and a dress. That's about it. No shoes. We lived in those clothes from Saturday to Saturday. Norcia was a very rich farming town. They had a lot of cattle, sheep, piggery, chook run, you name it. They killed about 8 to 10 sheep every day except on a Friday because of the amount of people on the mission. We had a lot of Aboriginal families who lived on the mission too. Our food, if you can call it food, I wouldn't give it to my dog today. We got the scrap meat in the orphanage. We got the heads of the sheep, the flaps and whatever was scrap meat. Now summertime, you got the big blowies around. They brought the heads over to us. We had to clean those heads, chop the horns off, wash the maggots off. That went in a pot for our breakfast in the morning. No veggies, sheep head, salt, water. We got a ladle full of that water in our plate, a dry slice of bread and a mug of tea. Fridays, being Catholics, we weren't allowed to eat meat, so we either had porridge or bread boiled in milk. I looked forward to that. I think that was the nicest meal we got for breakfast. The porridge, weevils and worms right through it. We had to fish all that out. We had nothing to eat. There were many times us kids went to the scrap bin from the nuns to fish out something to eat. Back in my days when I went to school in the 40s, they had the old inkwell and the pen, and of course, as kids, we blotted our paper. Punishment for that, we knelt on the floor in front of the class, both arms outstretched. No, we didn't get the cane, we didn't get the strap. We got a brick, 13 and under, brick on each hand. The nun went around with a sawn-off piece of dowling or a mop handle, broom handle, whatever it was. Now you got a brick there, someone hitting you here with that stick under your elbows and round on your ankles. Kids walked around with swollen joints for days. They'd pick anything up out of the wood heap, the nuns, and flog you with it. I mean flog you. Mum took us out of there because she saw that we weren't getting that education. Now, education came later on in my life. After I had my children, my firstborn, 1960, I had twin daughters. I was healthy, my children were. I started wondering why I was kept in hospital longer than a few days. I ended up being in there for 2 weeks. Towards the end of 2 weeks, I had 5 visitors by my bedside. Now, when Aboriginal women went into hospital, you didn't go in a normal hospital ward, you were out on the veranda. My babies were born in June. I was out on the veranda with louvers on, wind coming through the bottom of the veranda. Okay, these 5 people came to my bedside, and I was wondering what's going on. Okay, I had 2 doctors, a matron, and 2 police officers. We'd like to know how you're going to cope. This is the matron talking. When you leave the hospital. I said, I'll be fine. I've got a husband there who cares for me. I think it'd be better if we took the children from you. Repeat. My mother was taken, I was taken. They wanted to take my twins. Standing beside my bed saying, oh, you're only going to take them home and they'll die. My 2 girls are grandmothers today. I met and married a wonderful man who taught me a different way of living, how to forgive. 1994 saw the year that changed my life. I woke up one morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, I was sobbing my heart out, And my late husband said to me, "What's the matter with you, Cobb?" All I could say to him at that time was, "I want my mummy. I want my mummy." He said, "I'll tell you what, I'll take you back. Mum's buried in New Norcia. I'll take you back tomorrow and we'll go and visit her grave." So we went back the next day, and it was like I was going to a funeral for the first time in my life. A mother whose name I didn't know until 30 years later. Found out her real name. Mother Darling had 9 different names. She was placed in so many institutions, baptized into so many religions, and given so many names. The only name that we knew her by was Chickabiddy. I cried all the way up there and back. When I got home, he said to me, "I do believe if you write things down, it will help you." It took me 3 weeks before I can find file and paper, and I started writing. I've written a file full of my childhood hurt. I wanted to further my education as my children grew older, went to school. I couldn't help them with their homework. So I put myself through college. So I went to college, sat there for 6 months and pulled out. My husband said to me, "No, you go back." The following years saw me go back and graduate. I graduated with the residential childcare certificate, which enabled me to help children. A lot of people ask me, "Why do you go and work for these very people, the community services?" I don't know what they call themselves today. It used to be native welfare during my time. "Why do you go and work for these very people?" My answer to them was, if I could help one child make it in this world, it'll be worth it all. Thank you all for listening.
So there you go. And that's just one instance of how the Aboriginals were treated. That must have been incredibly draining, difficult. You know, their emotional health must have suffered incredibly, and probably still suffers. In fact, it still does suffer to this day. But yeah, hearing that floored me the first time I heard that. It's pretty incredible, some of the things that they went through, and like I said earlier, it was probably well-meaning, but it's just not the right thing